All right, before we jump into the episode, Jake and I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone that listened to our 5-part Scotch Matters miniseries. It was a lot of fun for us to put together. There's a pretty decent number of our listeners powered through all 5 episodes. So big thanks to everyone that did. For those that didn't, I highly recommend it, even if you think you don't like Scotch. Jake and I put together several recommendations throughout the 5 episodes on scotches that we think bourbon drinkers would like. And there's coupon codes. So
there is definitely coupon codes. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to kind of change the pace up a little bit, do something a little bit different, and talk about something that you and I both enjoy. Even though this is a bourbon podcast, we love all whiskey and mostly all spirits. So with that being said, yes, thank you.
A podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters.
This is Bourbon Matters. We are back to Bourbon Matters, and I am Jake with Gold Eagle.
I am the other Jake.
you usually do that open, so I didn't really know where I was going there. But we're joined today by Ephraim, and he is the Chattanooga rep. And this is a very exciting episode to jump back into Bourbon Matters because, as you guys probably know, both Jake and myself are huge Chattanooga fans. I would easily say it's my favorite craft distillery. So welcome to the call. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Both Jakes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Both Jakes. Yeah, it might get a little confusing. That's why I kind of go by Gold Eagle Jake, but yeah.
No, you guys are good. Thank you for having me. Sorry we had a little bit of trouble there getting on. But here we are.
No worries. We're here. It's exciting. So I don't know, why don't you, before we jump into like Chattanooga, introduce yourself, give a little background on, I know you've got some history in the industry and whatnot. So
so come from a hospitality background. Essentially was taken from front of house management to go work for distribution and craft spirit sales. Was there for a long time, and then right after the pandemic ended and kind of mandates went out, went to brand management for specific brands and continued on. And that's kind of been my role in the last 9 years of my life. Jumped on with Chattanooga as our state manager here in Illinois, Michigan, and Wisconsin in October of this past year. And it's been going great. We've had great success, and, it's nice to be in a market where people actually enjoy us and just kind of trying to find our niche and doing all these different events and stuff. And it's been a good 9 months with Chat now. But previous to that, I was with some other larger brands and houses and decided to make a move because I like what Chat's doing, and they're doing some really cool things, and the opportunity came around, and they're just good people. So that's what made me make the change.
Nice. Yeah, we haven't, I don't think, talked about Chattanooga at all on the podcast yet, and this is our 3rd year. So I'm excited to get to talk about them. I know there's been at least 2 master classes at Gold Eagle with Chattanooga, maybe even 2 last year, right?
No, I think we did 2. I think there's been 2 total. I think John did the first one a couple years ago. It was actually one of our first ever master classes. And then E did the last one. So if the voice sounds familiar and you were at our master class, Ephraim was there presenting. And by the way, I got to say, you absolutely killed it. I'm sure I told you that, but like I was talking to John when he was in town recently, and I told him that I was a little bit nervous maybe because I didn't really know you, and I knew you were new with Chattanooga, but you, for only being on board, I think maybe 4 or 5 months at the time, like you know a ton about the brand, so it seems like you've kind of jumped in, all in with this, and have just fully engulfed yourself into it.
I think actually it may have been my 2nd month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think when we did that, I think it was maybe my second month. And John had told me to come talk to you. He's like, "Do you know Jake from Gold Eagle?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've worked with him in the past." He's like, "He really loves Chattanooga. Go introduce yourself." And then I introduced myself, and you were like, "Do you want to do a class?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." So it's great that you that it turned out well. But yeah, I've fully immersed myself in the history and everything that they're doing, just because they're just doing cool things, and we're just trying to do something outside the box. So when I saw that, when I was even in like an interview process with them, it just made me be more hyped on taking on the role of representing them, because they're just doing unique things to push American bourbon and spirits forward, which is awesome. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
I'm all about it.
So for somebody, sorry, go ahead, Jake, if you got something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, let's jump into some of the cool things that
Yeah, I was gonna say,
does.
for somebody who like doesn't know what Chattanooga is, like, what, just give us a little bit of history and background, and then kind of, yeah, like, I mean, I'll let you do most of the talking, but you guys have a freaking experimental distillery separate from your real distillery,
Yes.
just churning out like small batches of the coolest and weirdest shit. So yeah, I'm sure this episode could go for hours, but yeah. So what is Chattanooga to somebody who has no idea what Chattanooga distilling is, or
So
Chattanooga whiskey?
the way I like to explain it is, we are the number one craft producing whiskey and bourbon company out of Tennessee. We are
I would
independently,
say in the world, my opinion.
and we did get that accolade last year by Whiskey Icon in the world as a craft producer of the year in the U.S. and the world. So that's huge. But what we do is, we wanted to bring back bourbon and distillation to Tennessee. Tennessee had a rich history of it pre-Prohibition, and after Prohibition kind of fell to the wayside. So when our founder, Tim, was coming up with the idea to start Chattanooga, he was wanting to bring back a distillery to Chattanooga, his hometown. And in 2011 is when the idea came about. We found out that we could buy whiskey from another state and bring it back and sell it, but we couldn't make it in our own county and sell it because it was illegal. So we started sourcing, like most startups do. We were sourcing from LDI at the time, which, as we all know, turned into MGP and so on and so forth, and was other things. But Tim had a vision about just, changing the laws. And we lobbied for 2 years to change those laws and regulations to allow us to distill in Chattanooga proper. And by doing that in 2013, not only did we change the laws for our county in Hamilton, but we opened up the rest of the surrounding counties in Tennessee to produce bourbon and actually have the ability to distill. So there's a reason that there's a Tennessee bourbon trail now, and I like to think that Chattanooga is a part of that reason. We are the ones who kind of pioneered this new forefront of distillation in Tennessee, and that's great to be a part of. And then after we were able to actually distill our own juice, we essentially opened up a distillery, and it was our founding distillery, which is now our experimental. And at that distillery, we can only produce one full-size barrel of whiskey a week in a copper. My mouth just don't want to say copper. Copper column pot still. CCs, too many C's. And we keep that going. And that's kind of where we just come up with different ideas and different mash bills that Tiana, our head distiller now, and Grant McCracken, our founding distiller, just come up with new ideas. Grant McCracken came on board. He comes from a beer background. So the easiest way to say it is, he wanted to do things with specialty malted grains, and Chattanooga whiskey will always be a 4-grain mash bill. We will always have at least 25% malted grain in any of our bourbons or whiskeys you ever get from us, minimum on a shelf. And proud to say now that we're independently owned and we aren't sourcing any juice. So we've just kind of continued on this trajectory, and we're just doing things outside of the box. And like you said, Jake, Gold Eagle, we have one distillery that's primarily just for experimentation. And we're just coming up with different mash bills, different blends. And then we have a full distillery that has kind of where we pump out our core line, and then holds also 3 Soleras, which some distilleries don't have. And we're able to do some blending of our own in-house, which is fun. But yeah, that's kind of the nitty gritty. I mean, if I want to get more into it, I could probably talk the whole hour just about our history. But to cut it short and simple, that's really it. Is just wanting to bring back distillation to Chattanooga proper and bring back this idea that American whiskey can be something different and doesn't have to be the same thing day in and day out. And you can just have fun with it like how it used to be. And
Yeah,
just push
pretty cool.
Yeah, just push, Tennessee. We're doing something cool.
Yeah, and don't undersell that.
Always,
I was gonna say, don't undersell the experimental distillery. It's not just different grains of different mash bills. I mean, you guys are doing like peated bourbons and pecan infused whiskeys. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff that's really pushing the boundaries and kind of almost paving and changing the way that American whiskey is being made. Being done at that distillery. So,
yes, to your point, like we did a Crowder infused liqueur that was whiskey based as our neutral grain spirit. And took some of our, traditional grains that we would use in a whiskey, aged some of it, put some of it into just white juice, and came out with a Jaeger-based whiskey, which is kind of fun. It's technically a liqueur, but it was still overproofs, and it's all whiskey as a neutral grain backbone. So kind of something that's fun, different. You said the pecan. Yeah, pecan was great. Triple peat, which I know you had a chance to taste. It was essentially...
so good.
We took 3 different peated malts, 3 different peated used barrels, and aged them for 5 years, and then put them all together and came out with a Scotch forward palate, but a bourbon finish. And I heard you guys talk about Scotch Matters, and it's kind of like was that thing to where it smells like peated Scotch on the nose, but it finishes like a bourbon, and it's just wild. And then they're continuing to push the boundaries. Tiana and Grant are having fun, and they're doing some great things. And yes, experimental is all about play and fun, and we still can house at that distillery about 200 barrels that are just random experiments that we're having to release slowly.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we talked about right before our Scotch Matters miniseries that experimentation is something that's lacking in certain parts of the bourbon industry. So it is really cool when you see a distillery like Chattanooga that almost puts experimentation at the forefront of what they're doing, and really pushing limits. Because it's, bourbon is great, but like, why not keep poking and, seeing what else you can get out of it,
Yeah, and we definitely push the boundaries about what we're doing, and that's what makes this, in my role, this job really fun, is that I'm able to come out and be like, hey, yeah, we came out with a bottle and bond, and our bottle and bond every year is different. It's not the same recipe every year. Or, I've got this great white port finish, and 6 months ago I had a Cabernet finish, and, we came out with Founders and all these other stuff. So it's consistently evolving while we still are a bourbon and whiskey company at heart. And that's what we're always going to push and always be, and continue to strive to be, one of the best. And as Jake said, in the US and in the world, that's one of our goals, but we want to just continue to get people to second guess themselves and be like, wow, you can do this with bourbon. Didn't think about that. And it's that's kind cool. Of like, there's some other pioneers out there that do it. I mean, the gentleman at New Riff, like they have a similar mindset of just continuing to push what American whiskey could be. And it's fun to kind of be in that group of innovators, I guess,
Yeah. I mean, speaking of that, like your generic meaning your like flagship kind of bourbon mash bill.
It's not generic.
It's very generic for Chattanooga standards, but it's very normal for any other distillery.
But
it's not white labeled.
Yeah. But your like flagship mash bill for bourbon
91
is actually
and the 111.
High malt bourbon.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. you know, taking the malted barley, which is typically like the throwaway ingredient for enzymes, basically,
Yeah.
and putting that as like a forward ingredient that actually lends like a decent amount of flavor to the final product is pretty cool. And you can absolutely taste it in the whiskey. Which, coming off of 5 episodes of Scotch, I can like really see it shine through this, and like it just adds a very nice fruity and like lighter kind of dimension to the bourbon in like a fantastic way. And as far as I know, it's the only mash bill of its kind, so
Yeah.
that it's very
So
cool.
it's yeah, to just piggyback on that, it is very high malt, but you what you said about the flavor was spot on. Like, you get much more flavor from the malt, whereas other high malted bourbons that I've tried, the malt just kind of comes through and just mostly mellows out the pour. Where this is like full bodied, viscous, and just completely full of flavor. And I don't want to say anything bad about Old Elk, because I love Old Elk, but their flagship high malt bourbon doesn't appeal to a lot of bourbon drinkers, just because the malt kind of just mellows it out. And it's more of, I would say that's more of like an intro whiskey, or appeals to like an Irish whiskey drinker, or maybe a Scotch drinker who likes unpeated. And again, I'm not saying anything bad about Old Elk, because some of their specialty releases are insanely good, and they push the limits as well and come out with a lot of really, really good whiskey. But whereas your high malt, you get a ton of flavor from the malt, and it really kind of carries through the whiskey in a great way. Not just adding kind of like a mellow tone to it. It just brings a lot of flavor to the table.
Yeah, I think the main difference between those two, like the Chattanooga bourbon and the Old Elk bourbon, are that the Chattanooga is more like a bourbon drinker's high malt bourbon.
Yeah.
Where the Old Elk is, like you said, Jake, I think someone just wants a very smooth, light kind of whiskey pour.
Or like a gateway into bourbon from Irish whiskey or Scotch.
Yeah, there's like absolutely nothing lacking in this. It just adds more dimension to it, to the bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with like 91, and I think Jake at Gold Eagle Jake, you would ask me like, how come our names are so very like simple? And it comes from a background of when we were doing the first run. This is the 91st barrel, and the 91st recipe that Tim and Grant tasted from the first initial 200 barrels that were ever made. And they thought this is a recipe that made sense in our palate, and we enjoy the flavor profile. And with that being said, I mean, it's corn, like you said, honey malted barley, caramel malted barley, and rye, pale malted rye. And just cut to 91. The fun thing that makes it, I feel like, have a little more depth and like flavor profile, is that we are doing a Solera blend with it. So we're putting it into a 4,000 gallon Solera at the end of it being matured in double oaked barrels. So we not only age it in a 3-char with a toast, we also age it in a 4-char with no toast. And then all those barrels from a single yield get put into a 4,000 gallon Solera that never ends. So it does intermingle with some maybe whiskey that could be 3 or 4 years old in there. And just adds a little bit more depth and character to it. And, the fact that we're doing like a 7-day fermentation time adds to it. The low A temperature, like 78 degrees, like low and slow, like you a barbecue. I think I made that joke earlier, Jake. I was like, let's talk about barbecue and how it applies to whiskey making. You can do low and slow and it's still going to turn out great. But yeah, and the 91's solid. I mean, it's a great bourbon. That's what I'm sipping on right now, actually, as well.
I just upgraded to the 111. But yeah, the 91 and the 111.
That's my baby.
Those are, I mean, they're ridiculous, and the price point is ridiculous. I think we have it for like 35 and 45 for the flagship bourbons. And I'm glad you mentioned the age, at least 2 years, because I do want to touch on that. Mm-hmm. Thank God I think it was John who came by initially, but thank God I tasted these things, because I think if somebody told me, hey, I got a 2-year bourbon from Chattanooga, Tennessee, do you want to try it? I probably would have said no.
Nope.
Do not,
I was gonna say it. Nope.
do not be afraid of these age statements, because blind tasting these, there is no way in hell I'd guess they're under 7 or 8 years old. They taste like they have a lot of, oak, a lot of good age. Like, they're aged enough. It doesn't matter how long they're aged for. They're aged enough. They're ready. They're done. These are 2 really, really good bourbons at their price point.
Thank you.
And I also want to ask about the malt, because I know for like the flagships, you guys use caramel malted barley and honey malted barley, and you use malted rye. Maybe this is a better question for a distiller, but I don't know. Do you think that has to do with the flavor that we're getting from the high malt content on this?
The high malt content on that, from when I asked our distillers about it, and the reason for using those malts in primarily a lot of our line, you'll always see some sort of pale malted rye. It comes from the backbone of, again, Grant worked with pale malted rye when he was making beers in his previous role, so he likes that flavor profile. The honey malted barley and the caramel malted barley, like you said, Jake, are kind of throwaways. I mean, they are kind of things that a lot of people don't really use, but they add a lot of flavor profile when you kind of cook them at that slow temperature. And then it also extracts more flavor from the malt, since we are coming off of the still at a lower proof. Like, we're coming off of our still at 133, which is like bare minimum to be considered a bourbon or, a whiskey. And then we're going in a barrel at 115. But it was more of the effect they wanted to extract more flavor from the malt, and you can extract that doing a slow roast. So that's one of the primary reasons that we work with those. I think it may also just be the fact that those malts, from what they had told me, Tiana, also at a younger age pull a little bit more flavor from the barrel, which allows it to taste older, like you had mentioned. That's something that she had told me, that those specialty malts just kind of allow a little bit more of a blend mixing in with the corn. But again, that's all from what I was told. I'm sure I can get more information on it, but honey malted barley, caramel malted barley. And again, I mean, I get this question all the time, and I always like to respond to it, is that there's not actually a caramel barley. You just cook the barley after it's been wet and almost seeded to a temperature where you extract that flavor of, caramel or honey. So it's just kind of like how you would do, anything in culinary. You just cook like things together. Like a coffee bean. Too. Yeah, like a coffee roast. So you can roast it to where it's a light, a dark and everything else. And I get that asked all the time, because they're like, oh, where do you get chocolate rye? I'm like, it's not actually chocolated rye. We just cook the rye to make it taste like chocolate.
So speaking of...
I was looking at, I've got my 3 bottles here. I've got the Founders from this year. I've got a bottled in bond from fall 2019. I don't know why it's 2019, but that was one that I had. And then a bottle of the rye. And I was, reading the information on the bottles. The rye's age statement is minimum 3 years, and like, this is black. Like, it's really dark, which is kind of incredible. And then, looking at all 3 of these that are, I think all of them are sub 5 year, maybe sub 6 year on the Founders.
Founders is going to be.
And these are all like Coca-Cola kind of dark. So it's pretty amazing what you guys are getting for these age statements, and like, there's definitely no lack of flavor on them. Like, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking of the rye, like, let's lead into the rye. We talked the 91 and the 111, and those 2 for a while were all you guys had. And then the rye started appearing and winning awards, and now the rye is thankfully available year round, right?
Yeah, so the rye actually was an experimental. Honestly, when it first came into market, it was something that we had done at experimental, and we were just trying to like gauge the market and seeing if the people would take to the rye that we're doing, because it's a completely different rye than most ryes out there. It's 70% malted rye and 30% corn, so it kind of bridges that gap of a bourbon drinking rye. And also because of the fact that we're using chocolate malted rye, caramel malted rye, pale malted rye, you get a lot of chocolate and caramel on the nose, but a little bit of that rye, what I always get is like clove and spearmint on the finish, but it still drinks very bourbon-esque. And I don't even know if that's a word, but I just made it one.
Everything's a word on this
But
podcast.
everything's a word.
Dulce de
But we're
leche.
doing it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a total word. That's from my home country. But yeah,
Jan.
you just get like Dr. Pepper notes on the front, kind of spice cola notes, and just a really good drinkable, approachable rye that doesn't taste like you're smoking Jarm cigarettes. That's what I always like to tell everybody. Because I've had a lot of ryes that I love, but I just get straight clove and vanilla bomb sometimes, where this is kind of the polar opposite of that. And then again, it's 3 years old, and we are using like a 3 char barrel with a toast, so it's just a fun, exciting rye. And we won all those awards, like you were saying, Jake, Gold Eagle. And then we realized that we had something, so we opened it up outside of just being a limited item. So now it's in our core. So yeah, the rye, the 91 to 111, you will always find on the shelf anytime from Chattanooga. Those will always be produced. Yeah, but taste and let me know what you think.
I mean, the nose on the rye is phenomenal.
I already know what you think, Gold Eagle.
Yeah, I gotta tell the listeners though. It's most. So I will say, like most malted ryes or chocolate malted ryes that I've tried, the chocolate malt just kind of dominates and overpowers, and you don't get a lot of that here. It's just very, very well balanced. And like you said, I think it does appeal to bourbon drinkers because tasting this blind, I don't know if I'd guess that this was a rye. I'd probably guess it was a high rye bourbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of another thing that we want to take a step back of. I mean, most ryes that are out in the market are like 95.5s, right? Or we got like those 80-20-10s or those standard cocktail ryes that are like 51, 30-20s or something, where we kind of took a different jab at it and went a little bit higher in the corn and just worked with these specialty malts of the rye, and it just is great. I always tell everyone, and I said it because my wife called me out on it, is the 91, maybe you want to take Chattanooga out on a date. The rye made me want to take them out on the second date. And the 111 made me fall in love. That's the way when I tasted through the whole line. The 111 is my baby. That is my go-to. If anyone asks me, like any event we do, and anyone's like, I want to taste one thing from you. What do you want to taste? And I'm like, let's do a 111, and then we can dial back. But that is something that I just have taken a huge, huge love for.
Yeah. Jake's a big rye guy. What do you think of this rye?
Yeah, I really like it. I think you nailed it, Jake, that the chocolate notes are there, but it's not taking over the whole palate. I'm getting almost like some like wine finish kind of notes on it. Like there's some like really deep kind of like red fruits and like kind of thing going on, which is excellent. Like a great pairing with the traditional rye flavors of like the mint and the baking spice kind of thing, and like, it's very good.
This almost hits, like we talk about the 4 categories of rye. This almost hits all 4. You get a little sweet, you get a little spice, you get a little bit of mint, you get a little bit of earthiness, like all 4 in one. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good rye. It's well rounded. I think this was your best seller when you came and did a tasting which is shocking because like we have a hard time
No one
selling
ever wants
rye.
rye.
I know everyone wants bourbon,
No one ever
but
wants it.
this was definitely our biggest seller that night that you came and did the tasting. So
I think honestly also, like, I think at that tasting when we did the cocktail tasting at Gold Eagle, I made cocktails with the rye and the 91. And all I did with the rye is I literally just made a batched old fashioned, but instead of using like orange bitters, I used chocolate bitters to kind of just accent those notes of chocolate. And it crushed. Like, it was amazing to see people's reaction to it. And it's been amazing to see coming in to Chattanooga. The last company I worked for was just straight bourbon. Yes, we were a high rye bourbon, but I primarily sold bourbon. And when I was like, oh, you have a rye to sell, I'm like, oh man, rye's always kind of hard. Sometimes no one wants it. But I've seen the polar opposite with our rye, which is doing tastings and even things like you said, people, it doesn't drink like a normal rye. It's drinking like something a little bit more unique and a little more bourbon finished. And then you make a cocktail with it and it just crushes. I had a Manhattan with it the other day and it's just amazing.
Yeah, you're giving me ideas for the weekend now.
yeah,
Just drink the whole bottle. Don't worry about it. Gold Eagle has more. I'm sure you're going to,
we
get
do.
some. I'm sure you know somebody who has some.
Yeah, I mean, it like the nose is a little bit deceiving on it because it's a bit more of like a traditional rye nose, but there's a couple other notes on there, like maybe like honey or something that are like a little bit brighter.
Yeah,
There's some honey.
That's like like it's very interesting. But yeah, the taste is like, yeah, I think you're right, Jake. I think it hits like every single quadrant of the rye spectrum. Like it's good.
For me, I get a lot of, like I mentioned, like I know I said like Dr. Pepper cola like scent, but when I open like a fresh Dr. Pepper, you get like that cola pop, and then you get a little bit of like that, prune smell, which I hate to say, but we all know that it was in there at one point. And kind of that medicinal like nose that if I just grab the rye, that's what I smell first off. It's like chocolate, prunes, stone fruits, I guess maybe not prunes, but like more stone fruit things. Mm-hmm. And then on the palate, it kind of hits very smooth and light and toffee and honey forward for me, and everyone's palate's different. And then I get like the clove and spearmint and a little bit of spice on the back.
yeah. No, it's a solid rye. If you don't like this rye, you are wrong. Just kidding. But yeah, solid rye.
We're not kidding.
I can't offend anybody on here, but yeah, after the podcast, I'm gonna say totally not kidding. Cool.
It's won a bunch of awards, just like it.
It definitely has, yeah. So next, I think we got to talk about the Founders.
Yeah, let's do it. So Founders is unique. So Founders is actually released once a year, and it's our anniversary blend. The cool thing about Founders is it is the only time that you will ever find any sourced product in any of our items. So what we actually did is when we stopped sourcing, we put aside some barrels from that original LDI recipe that we were first getting, which was a typical 70-25 recipe, pre-prohibition type of style, or post-prohibition type of style of bourbon. And we actually just put some barrels aside and put it into a large Solera at our main distillery. So at our main distillery, we have 3 Soleras. So we have one that the 91 goes into and gets finished in. One that we call our future barrel, which is essentially just a blend of different experimental barrels that Tiana and Grant think can work well together in a 3,000-gallon oak infinity Solera barrel. And then we have our past barrel, which is old LDI juice from when we stopped sourcing around 2015 and 2017. And Founders is a blend that Tim puts together every year, and he takes a little bit of each of those barrels at proof and then blends them together to come up with a unique blend every year. So this year's anniversary is 12% of the LDI stuff. I think 68 of the 91, and then the rest
60.
is future barrel. 60?
60, 91, 28 Infinity.
That's what it was. 28. I knew there was an 8 somewhere in there. Yeah. So the Infinity barrel is the future. The 91 is our flagship, and then the past, the 12%, is the old LDI juice. And this is the only time, and I always like to let people know that, because all of our other juice is 100% made by us. It's the only time you'll ever find any sourced product. And
oh boy, you're making them crack it open.
Get it going, dude. It tastes like blueberry cobbler and blackberries. This one blew my mind. I tried last year's.
I gotta get another glass.
Yeah, I tried last year's versus this one, and complete polar opposites. Actually, I had to buy a bottle from you today.
He did,
Jake, because I only was given 2 sample bottles, and I burnt through them at events, and someone else asked me for another one for another event. So, hey, but you support us, I can support you. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, thank you to you. You've gotten us, I think, a couple extra cases of the founders. I think we've gone through like 6 or 7 cases already, and there's only 3 bottles left on the shelf as of this recording. So by the time this airs on Sunday, I doubt there's going to be any left. So I don't want to push it or promote it too much, but we're going to have it at the bar probably through the weekend. So come in and give it a taste, and then you got to keep an eye out for next year's release, because it's for sure a special bottle. But it's really, really good. But after tasting through the 91, the 111, the white port finish, which we haven't really talked about yet, like, I think those are just as good.
Yeah, the white port is amazing. That's actually really unique in the fact that is 5-year-old juice from us. We took a 3-year-old and then aged it for an additional 2 years. What'd you think about that? I'm stopping because I see you tasting the founders.
Yeah, definitely getting those like berry kind of flavors. Oh, yeah. It's very, very good. Definitely not in like the traditional bourbon kind of flavor realm. Again, lots of like finished kind of flavor notes going on. It's very tasty. The nose is kind of like a freight train of complexity too. It's hard to pick out exactly what I'm smelling because there's just a lot going on.
You can just call it the Chattanooga Choo Choo of bourbon, man.
I like that, Chattanooga Choo Choo. It definitely opens up and kind of mellows and rounds itself out too once it gets a little oxygen. So you'll want to come back to this pour in a day or two.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've done. For me, I get a ton of like almost red velvet cake flavors, and then a lot of like cobbler notes and like butter finish, pie crust type of things. But again, everyone's palate's different. I don't like to normally always focus on tasting notes because if I tell you sometimes like it tastes like cicadas, so I'll be like, oh, I do taste a cicada. It's like, did you ever eat a cicada? But
yeah, I'm a fan. It's very good.
Thank you.
I won't buy a second bottle. I'll let listeners have a crack.
Cha-ching, the order just came in. Jake just bought another bottle on the podcast.
Yep, sold. It'll be waiting for you there.
Yeah.
I will be looking for next year's though.
Yeah.
Because I really enjoy this. So
yeah, so every year we will always come out with a few releases. So Founders being one of them. We will always release 2 bottle and bonds. We'll always have the core line, which is like the 91, the 99 rye, and the 111. And then we always come out with a finish. I think Jake touched on it this year. We had a white port finish. Oh, look at that kitty.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm letting him. He wants to be a part of the podcast.
So this lasts. Beginning of this year, we came out with a white port.
Which we do still have like 12 bottles. I think we got like 8 cases of this one, but we're down to like 2.
Nice. Yeah, I know we sold a lot of that at the tasting too. Mm-hmm. So the white port's unique in the fact that it is 5-year-old Chattanooga whiskey. It is our bourbon. So we took 3 different mash bills, aged them for 3 years in 3 different barrels, and then took those, blended them together, and then aged them for an additional 2 years and used white port barrels from the Douro Valley, which is the highest elevation level in Portugal, and let it sit there for an additional 2 years. So this actually is 5 years old, and it's not. I've had some port finishes that are a little bit over finished, in my opinion, where this still tastes like you get all of those port notes, but it still doesn't get over complicated, and you get a lot of cinnamon, a lot of raisin, some dark cherry notes, but it's not aggressively sweet, which is what I've had with some other port finishes where I'm just like, this is too sweet for my palate.
Well,
that's surprising with a 2-year secondary finish. Is a long finish.
Also, though, a lot of people might not realize white port is way different than regular port.
Red.
Yeah, red port. So there's not a whole lot of white port out there. I think we only sell one white port, and like nobody really ever buys it. It's very niche and unique thing. But it kind of just, in my opinion, tasting the whiskey, it sweetens it up maybe just a tad, without giving it any of those red fruity notes or any of those tanniny notes. It just kind of like almost rounds it out and just gives it a little kiss of sweetness. Like, you're absolutely right. It still tastes like a bourbon. It tastes like it could be unfinished, which is crazy that because it sat in there for 2 years. But it's a really good whiskey.
I'm still taking in the
You're
finish
still taking in
of
the
founders.
I see you smacking your lips.
I had to rush
tasty.
through the founders to get to this white port. So
the white port's delicious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is one of my favorites. Outside of, dude, that pecan that we came out with last year was really good too. And I normally don't like sweet finished, types of whiskey, but it literally just reminded me of like my mom's pecan pie, where I was just like, I want more than one slice, and by that I mean glasses.
yeah.
So what, or if you're allowed to share, what experimental things are in the pipeline right now?
Oh,
And I'm going to add on to that question. What experimental things are in the pipeline also that are going to hit distribution? Because I know most of the experimental things are only sold at the distillery. Are there any like bigger batches in the works?
That is something that we definitely are discussing. Primarily experimental normally stays in home state because we want to give back to the people who've given to us as a start. So we kind of release those primarily for Tennessee only. I know there has been discussions to kind of expand that slightly into other markets. Obviously, Illinois will be some of that. There may be, without saying too much, there may be things beyond just the bottle and bond coming into Illinois this year. Possibly some single barrels, which will be fun.
I want to poke the bear, but this is all I have left on my single barrel Chattanooga.
We did restart a single barrel program that we're working on, and I know Gold Eagle, Jake, you and I have talked about that, so there could be some fun things about that coming through. There may be a new finish coming out. I know that Tiana and Grant are playing around with some different type of, liqueur forward whiskeys for the end of the year. So that could be something to keep an eye out on. I'm not sure how many will make it into our market, but I know for sure this year, obviously the next thing coming in outside of Founders would be our spring 2020 bottle and bond. And then we will have some other things coming through with single barrels and possibly another finish before the end of the year. Don't quote me on that, but it is possible. It depends on schedules, and I don't want to get myself into too much trouble if my bosses see this and they're like, "Hey, what are you saying?" I'm like, "I didn't say nothing." But yes, there will be some more releases coming out for us. It's just more the fact like experimental tends to stay in Tennessee proper. Not to say that, if you're looking for it, you can find it on our online sales, but primarily we like to keep it in home base.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, I'm glad we got to do this. The product line is pretty phenomenal. I think Jake summed it up and said, very well that we're both big fans. Yeah, I'm looking forward to another masterclass, hopefully at some point in the future. With maybe some new releases, we'll see. But
there will be new releases. That's the one fun and exciting thing about Chattanooga as a whole is, we will always have something new and exciting. I've tried to explain that to people like in classes when I was talking about Bottle and Bond. I'm like, listen, if you see a 2019 Bottle and Bond for fall, get it. Because it's not going to be the same as a spring 2019 Bottle and Bond. It's not going to be the same as the 2020 spring that we're coming out with. These will always change. And even though like we don't put a different top on it or a different color, if you look at the back of our label, you can see that the mash bill and the blend of barrels that we put together to make these unique recipes are all different. So we don't try to be a heavily like, bourbon hunter type of brand. But we're just doing exciting things. And like,
please
that's
don't.
What drew me to it is because
I want to buy the whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. Like we don't ever want to like be like that allocated brand at all. We have a firm standing of a belief of called whiskey to the people. And that was what we pioneered and lobbied with to change these laws to allow us to distill.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't give whiskey to the people if the people can't get the whiskey. That's just kind of how it works. And it's something that Tim and all of us strongly believe in, and that everything should be shared and have fun with. And yeah, so if you see Bottle and Bond and it's there, grab it, because it may not be there ever again, because our recipes will always be changing. Just like if you see a cast finish, grab it, because we aren't going to probably reproduce it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not gonna kill your pocketbook either.
Yeah, no, it's not. Like the prices are incredible. But yeah, to add on to the Bottle and Bond thing, the one memory I have of the mass that really stood out was like how different the two Bottle and Bonds were, and they were like two releases back to back, and half the room or maybe a third of the room like loved one, where 2/3 of the room loved the other one. And they tasted nothing alike. One of them had like wheated bourbon in there, the other did not. So they are like very, very different. And your guys' website is great. There's a ton of information on the website. I'm pretty sure every single batch and experimentation that's ever been bottled, you can go on the website and like search through, find the mash bill, find what type of grains were in there. So I love the transparency as well.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for transparency. I think it's stupid that anyone keeps anything secret nowadays. Yeah. So yeah, I love to see brands that come out and that give you all the information.
You can get everything you ever want to know. Like you can jump on there and the history page will tell you about the start of when Chattanooga was founded and how we came into play. You can jump on there and click on any of our whiskeys and get a total breakdown on what's in every bottle, how long it was aged, where we put it in, and down to, where sometimes we get told, hey, we're doing the new Bottle and Bond for spring for 2020. And I get sent a list and it's like, it's this barrel, this barrel, this barrel. And I'm even jumping on the website as a state manager and like, okay, so what's in that barrel? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So this is heavily malted rye, or this one's going to be a heavily malted wheat, and then it's a blend of all three that have been aged then in like 6 different barrels. Cool. And now I got to try to figure out how to explain that in like 5 minutes. But yeah, Tiana and Grant are great. I mean, Grant is obviously our founding distiller. I think I mentioned he comes from, a beer background. He was with Boston Beer. And Tiana actually started off in our experimental, and she expressed an interest in distillation and is now our head distiller. And she's just a beast. And Grant is also, a mastermind, and they're just doing some really cool stuff. And Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, to jump back to the bottled and bond real quick,
Yeah.
I think it's really cool to use
Single
the
barrels.
bottled and bond
That's all I got
platform as
for now. For now,
Good luck. Don't. You just wait.
I'm waiting.
Yeah, I think it's cool to use the bottled and bond platform as a way to showcase different, basically recipes at the same proof, with the same restrictions around them,
Sure.
and to really give the consumer a clear comparison from release to release. Like you're
Yeah.
giving them these super strict standards and then playing as much as you possibly can within those standards to create really unique things. Like I think that's super cool.
Nobody else
Yeah,
is
I mean,
doing
really
that,
awesome.
or nothing even close to that.
No, they aren't. And that's the thing is there's loopholes in all these laws and stipulations, right? It's like if you're a kid and your parents ask you a question, and you're like, well, I didn't lie. Was I there? Yes. Was I there the whole time? No. But I was there. So yes, I was at so-and-so's house. And that's the fun thing with bottle and bond laws. There's really only 4 regulations for it. It doesn't say it has to be the same recipe every year. It doesn't say it has to be in throughout, but people just have adhered to it. And you can throw these curveballs at what, American bourbon and whiskey is and still be within the rule set and come up with something fun. Like our 2018, if you ever find it, it is mesquite smoked barley. And it almost smells like a campfire on your nose. Where 2019 was more wheated forward. So completely different profiles. And yeah, it's just the new one will be completely different than 2020. And it's nice to be innovative, I guess, is the easiest way to say it.
Jake's going to have to check with his warehouse contacts for that 2018.
Yeah, there's none of that. I guarantee it. But that is from a retailer standpoint, that's so cool. But the biggest thing to overcome is when someone's like, "Oh, I've tried Chattanooga Bottle and Bond. I'm not a big fan." I've never heard anybody say that, but just from I know that the everyday bottle changes as years go on, and there's certain things that people say, I'm not a fan of that, and then they try it 3 years later, and it's night and day difference. So I think that's one of the only hurdles you have to overcome. But people that know and people like us that are in the know, it's so cool, and it just makes it. And people are pretty brand loyal, especially now that there's so many distilleries out there. They're kind of starting to figure out what distilleries they like, and I think all the experimentation and just switching up things like the bottle and bond recipe every year keeps it very interesting for people like us who are just fans of the whiskey.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. I mean, even on this side, doing different events and classes and bourbon focused things, or even just spirit focused events, and going out and seeing the response from people who are like yourselves, who like us already, and then showing up at an event and then bringing 5 of their friends over who are like, "You got to try this." Oh, I don't really. It's a 2-year-old. I won't like it. No, you have to try it. And then they try it. And they're like, "Wow, how old is that?" I'm like, "It's 2 year." "What's the proof?" 91. "That drink's way older than 2 year." Like, yeah, it's good. Just don't get stuck in this mindset. So it's fun and interesting. And then to your point, I mean, Gold Eagle, Jake, you said it best. I mean, it's going to keep the consumer innovative. And I feel like, in your role from that side at the store, you're able to kind of educate. Sometimes it's hard for myself to get people to understand, this is a completely different bottle and bond. Taste it. It's good.
Yeah.
It may not be like the last one, or, but because we don't change labels and we aren't doing different tops and we aren't doing different things. It's just same label, bottle and bond, 2020. Pick it up, give it a go.
I think this is really I don't want to be pretentious, but it's kind of like the connoisseur's kind of like whiskey brand, where like you've already tried Buffalo Trace, you've tried Heaven Hill, you've tried Jim Beam, you already know those things. But like, if you want something that's gonna like punch you in the face, that's cool and different,
And good.
like this is where you'd want to go. Yeah,
Good for. I mean, like even at 111. Like, I mean, I hate to, sound egotistical, but I mean, a 111 cask strength bourbon at under $50, that's craft, is very hard to come by.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have something great in that, and it's 3 years old. It is kind of like a homage to the style of, Booker's or Stag Junior, where we aren't filtering it. There's still barrel sediment at the bottom of each bottle. We take a small batch yields and then blend them all together after about 3 to 4 years and just come out with a great bourbon. And it's the exact same recipe as a 91, but tastes completely different.
No, you guys are doing the right thing by keeping the prices right. It's only a matter of time, a couple of years from now, where we're gonna see brands make it or break it, and I think the ones that are gonna make it are the ones that not only are producing great whiskey, but also keeping the price right, because the consumer can only spend so much money on whiskey until they realize, like, oh shit, I got a whiskey to last me 3 lifetimes. But
yeah,
I wouldn't know.
No, you wouldn't. No. Keep going.
I think you have a bottle of Founders actually waiting for you.
Yeah.
You got another bottle to add to the collection.
I'm paying for Jake's grandkids' retirement.
I wish that was the case, but yeah, no.
Do you want to pay for my grandkids? But yeah, any other thoughts on any things you want to dive into? I know we don't have a lot.
No, I was
going to
say thank you. Like, this was great. Thank you for your time. We could go for 3 more hours if we really wanted to. But we got to cap it off at some point and get another masterclass on the books for the fall, maybe, and then people can come in and learn a bit more about Chattanooga. But this was, I think this was a really good episode. A lot of good content. And your knowledge with the brand and everything, the whiskeys were incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I didn't want to get too in depth. Like I said, I know we were kind of just on a limit, and I know we're just kind of shooting the shit, for lack of a better word. But yeah, Chattanooga whiskey's great. We're not sourced. We're independently owned. We've been around for now our 12th year. We were craft producer of the year last year in the U.S. and the world, and we're just doing some really fun things with the idea of what bourbon and whiskey can be, and we're coming out of Tennessee, and we aren't doing any true traditional style of Tennessee filtration or process. That's it. We're the best. I'm joking. But try us. That's all I could say. That's all I've ever said of anything, is like, at least give me a shot. Try it. Mm-hmm. If you don't like it, we've got other things that you may like within our portfolio. And yeah, it'll be fun. It's going to be a fun ride.
All right, I'm sorry to...
Yeah, do you have any...
I was going to say, I'm sorry to do it. I got to call you out. Jake did buy a bottle of Chattanooga. The 111 proof.
Yeah, it's the one I don't have.
Yeah, it's a great purchase.
I got convinced. I got to try it.
It's a really good purchase.
It is delicious. It is delicious. I'm so glad. I mean, I don't want to say nothing, but
nice. Me too.
Yeah. There it is. Yeah. It is a great pour. You won't regret it.
So do you have any social media to shout out or anything else?
Just follow us at Chat Whiskey. That'd be great. We all kind of post content to that. We have a really great new person who's doing a lot of our marketing, and Chuck, and he's come on board. So we have a lot of different content and videos, and kind of tell you a little bit more about our backstory, and things that we're doing. So yeah, just follow at Chat Whiskey. It's on all social media platforms. If you just even jump onto our website, Chattanooga Whiskey, you just search that in Google, we'll pop up, and you can find all of our links to that. If you want to follow me, you're more than welcome to. I'm sure you'll see something from me on their pages, since we always post about different things we're doing. But
Give
Yeah,
us
just
give us
follow
your
us and-
tag so if people want to follow you.
Oh, my tag is the worst. So I made it. My tag is the worst. I made it when I was younger and didn't think that anyone would ever have to follow me for business. Um, and I was kind of making a joke on myself, but my Instagram handle is at knife fight EC. Last name, last initials of my name. But yes, I at one point was doing music and I would go by the name Knife Fight for my shows. And I made an Instagram for that. And then I wound up having too many people who tag me at things and I got stuck with it. So yeah,
I've seen a lot worse.
that is,
Everyone's got a
Yeah.
old email
it
address
was,
or at something that's
you don't,
not the
dude,
best, but
I have like 10 different emails from like being young that I'm just like, I don't want anyone to have that. But yeah, but now at this point, I'm just stuck with it. But yes, you can follow me. If you just search also Ephraim Cuellar, EPHRAIM CUELLAR on Instagram, I'll pop up. I'm not private. You'll see a bunch of posts about Chattanooga or me with my kids. And that's really it.
cool.
Nice. Tasting room and tours and everything at the distillery?
Yes, so we have 2 distilleries, like I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. So one distillery, the EXP, you can do full-on tastings. We do tastings 7 days a week. Sunday hours are a little limited. And then you can just kind of show up or reserve freehand if you're in the area. The tasting experience will walk you through the whole process. You'll get to see the room and at the end get to taste a flight of the items that we currently have in market and then new things that are in experimental and then a chance to purchase if you want to. It's all there. The main distillery, we don't really do any like tours, but the tasting room gives you a full example of what we do at the main distillery at a small scale.
Cool.
And yeah, it's right across actually from the Chattanooga Choo Choo, which I did not know was a real train until I went down to Chattanooga. And I was like, wow, all the songs that still exist? Like, I thought it was just like a thing that someone made up and it was just like folklore. And I got completely proved wrong. And I got to see the train. And I was like, wow, I'm going to take the midnight train to Georgia, except it's not running anywhere. And throw some bottles off the side.
Yeah, me
yeah.
and Jake are hoping to make it down sometime.
Yeah, I almost
Let us
We
know.
were talking about that last
I almost
week.
went a couple weeks ago, but yeah, it's a bucket list trip. I want to go for at least a whole weekend and just be able to experience the town because I know it's a beautiful place to visit, and then spend a good amount of time at the distillery and experimental distillery, just tasting through the hundreds of things you guys probably have down there.
Yeah, it's the town is great. You know, it's a very historical town, ton of history, tons of fun, cool things and areas to look at. Lots of great restaurants. If you guys ever want to make it down there, Jake's, just hit me up and we'll take it from there. But
Cool.
yeah, you're more than welcome. At any time.
Thank you. I got to plug Gold Eagle before we go, and of course, drop a coupon code for Chattanooga whiskey. BM Chat, and that's BMCHATT. Get you 10% off any bottle of in stock Chattanooga whiskey that we have. Only valid online on our app or website. Excludes items that are already on sale. But yeah, you can find us at goldeaglewine.com. Find us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Follow us on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. And use that coupon code BMChat. There's a few things like the white port finish that won't be there for too much longer. And the founders, I highly doubt, will still be there when this episode airs. But if it is, use that coupon code quick. But yeah, thank you again for your time, E. This was a phenomenal episode. Looking forward to more master classes and hopefully a single barrel in the near future.
We will get there. Don't you worry.
Had to throw that in there.
throw all the jabs.
Jab.
Trust me, I'm throwing jabs on my end too.
Right.
It'll happen. It's going to happen. Do not worry.
Right, I got to do the obligatory plug real quick. Follow us on Instagram at Bourbon Matters. Follow us on Facebook as well. Email us if you want to see us do anything in particular. bourbonmatters@gmail.com. Our website, bourbonmatterspodcast.com. Watch us on YouTube and Spotify. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening, everybody. This is a great episode. Ephraim, awesome having you on.
Thank you.
Super, super cool to get to talk about such a amazing distillery.
We could
really
go
cool.
on for hours. Trust me. We barely even touched on some other stuff.
If you can't tell, we're geeking out right now talking about Chattanooga.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, I can geek out and nerd out with the best of them. But yes, thank you guys for having me. This has been great. It's great just to even get in front of other people that may not see us, and now they know a little bit more about our history. And thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'd love to have you on again in the future. Mm-hmm. So
let's do it.
Cheers to that.
Cheers, everybody.
See you next week, everyone.
Bye.